When an arrogant millionaire drives his luxury car into a poor neighborhood, determined to fire his cleaning lady, he angrily knocks on the door of her humble home, only to be met by two desperate twin girls, their eyes full of tears, who cry, "Out there, our mother isn't breathing." Hearing this, his heart races, but what he does next is so shocking it will forever change the fate of that entire family. The heavy air of that July afternoon seemed to foreshadow something different in Edward Miller's life. At 52, owner of one of the country's largest construction firms, he adjusted his Italian silk tie in the elevator mirror as he descended to his company's parking garage. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not just from the suffocating heat, but from the irritation that had been consuming him for weeks. Maria Garcia, his housekeeper, had missed work again. It was the third time that month. For someone like Edward, who had built his empire on discipline and punctuality, it was unacceptable. Every employee had a specific function. Every cog in the machine needed to run perfectly, and Maria was compromising the system. Getting into his luxury sedan, a Mercedes, Edward instructed his driver to head to the address he held. He had never gone to an employee's home before, but this time would be different. The dismissal would be personal, an example to all the other employees. As the car navigated the city streets, leaving behind the mirrored skyscrapers of downtown and entering a less affluent neighborhood, Edward impatiently checked his gold watch. The luxury vehicle stood out starkly against the simple houses of the community. Children stopped their games to watch the car slowly make its way up the potholed street. Edward felt uncomfortable under the residents' curious stares. The driver stopped in front of a small house with peeling paint and a single iron-barred window. Edward hesitated for a moment before getting out. The blazing sun made him squint as he straightened his impeccable suit. His Italian leather shoes touched the uneven ground, and he walked purposefully to the worn wooden door. He knocked 3 times, firmly. The ensuing silence was broken by muffled sounds from inside the house. Hurried little footsteps, children's, voices whispering. The door opened slowly, revealing 2 identical girls, about 8 years old. Their eyes were red and swollen, tears streaming down their smudged faces. "Mister, our mum isn't breathing." The words hit Edward like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he was paralyzed, his brain trying to process the information. The girls, wearing simple but clean clothes, grabbed his hands with surprising strength and pulled him inside the house. The interior was dark and stuffy. An old ceiling, fan spun lazily, doing little more than circulating the hot air. Edward was led to a small bedroom where Maria Garcia lay on a narrow bed. Her face was pale, a thin layer of sweat covered her forehead, and her lips had a bluish tint that sent a shiver of fear down Edward's spine. Completely forgetting the reason for his visit, Edward grabbed his phone and dialed 911. While explaining the situation to the operator, he watched the 2 girls. They held their mother's hands, whispering words of comfort that seemed more intended to soothe themselves. The room was even simpler than the rest of the house. An old dresser held a few photo frames with pictures of the girls at different ages. Always beside their mother, there was no sign of a father figure in any of them. A wooden crucifix hung crookedly on the wall, and under the bed, Edward could see a small, worn suitcase. While they waited for the ambulance, one of the girls, whom he would later learn was named Alice, explained between sobs that their mother had been feeling unwell for days, but kept working. She said she couldn't stop, that she needed to buy our school supplies, the little girl said, gripping her unconscious mother's hand even tighter. The other girl, Beatrice, remained silent, her eyes fixed on her mother's face, as if trying to wake her with the sheer power of her gaze. Edward noticed that despite their simple clothes, both were well cared for, their hair perfectly braided. The wail of a siren cut through the heavy afternoon air. Within minutes, paramedics crowded the small room with their equipment. Edward was pushed into a corner, watching helplessly as they examined Maria and prepared her for transport. "Pressure's very low," one paramedic said to the other. "Possible. Severe anemia. We need to move her immediately." The girls started crying harder when they saw their mother being placed on the stretcher. Edward, unsure exactly what to do but feeling a responsibility he'd never experienced before, approached them. "You need to be strong now," he said, surprised by the softness in his own voice. "I'll go with you to the hospital." As the ambulance departed, siren blaring, Edward looked at the two frightened girls beside him and felt something shift within him. The irritation that had brought him there had transformed into a deep, inexplicable concern. In that moment, he was no longer just the strict boss. He was the only person these children had to lean on. The county hospital was packed, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the weak air conditioning as Edward waited with the twins in the emergency room. Waiting area. Alice and Beatrice clung to each other, their small bodies trembling despite the heat. Every time the ER doors swung open, they jumped, hoping for news of their mother. Edward glanced at his watch. It had been 2 hours since they arrived. His phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls and messages from his assistant Martha, warning him about important meetings he was missing. For the first time in his life, it didn't seem important. "Mr. Miller?" A social worker approached them. Her face was kind, but her eyes conveyed concern. "Could we speak for a moment?" Edward hesitated, looking at the girls. An elderly woman waiting nearby offered to sit with them. Reluctantly, he followed the social worker to a more private corner. "Mr. Miller, I'm Denise Foster. The situation is delicate. Ms. Garcia is in critical condition, severe anemia, malnutrition, possibly a perforated ulcer. She'll need emergency surgery." Denise paused, consulting her notes. "The problem is, we haven't found any family listed as emergency contacts." Edward ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble. I'm her employer. Don't the girls have a father?" "According to the records, the father abandoned the family 3 years ago. We have no address or contact information." Denise lowered her voice. "Mr. Miller, we need to decide what to do with the girls. They can't stay alone, and standard procedure would be to place them in temporary foster care." The words foster care made Edward's chest tighten. He looked over at Alice and Beatrice, huddled together on the hard plastic bench. In just a few hours, he had discovered more about his employee's life than in 2 years of her working for him. "No," he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "They can stay at my house. I have space, staff. I can take care of them until Maria recovers." Denise studied him carefully. "Mr. Miller, I understand your good intentions, but there are legal procedures. We'd need formal authorization, visits from social workers." "Do whatever is necessary," Edward interrupted, "but I won't allow these girls to be separated or taken into foster care, not when I can help." Just then, a doctor emerged from the ER doors, calling for Maria Garcia's family. Edward and the girls approached quickly. "The surgery is urgent," the doctor explained, "but our surgical center is overwhelmed. The waiting list is at least 2 days." 2 days! Edward felt anger rise. "Doctor, if she needs urgent surgery, how can she wait 2 days?" The doctor looked uncomfortable. "Unfortunately, that's our reality. We only have 2 operating rooms functioning and many critical cases." Edward took out his phone, dialing a number he hadn't used in a long time. "Dr. Evans, Edward Miller, I need an urgent favor." His voice took on the authoritative tone he usually reserved for negotiations. "I have a patient needing emergency surgery. Yes, I'll cover all the costs. I need an immediate transfer to your hospital." The wheels began to turn. In less than an hour, a private ambulance arrived to transfer Maria. Edward watched as the girls said goodbye to their still unconscious mother, kissing her pale face before she was taken away. "You're going to have to be very brave now," Edward told the girls, kneeling to meet their eye level. "Your mother is going to a hospital where they'll take very good care of her. In the meantime, you'll stay at my house." "But what about our things?" asked Beatrice, speaking for the first time since they left home. "And school?" "We'll figure everything out," Edward promised, surprised by his own determination. "First, let's get some clothes and whatever else you need from your house. Then we'll go to my house where there's a room ready for you both." As they walked to the car, Edward felt the weight of his decisions. His meticulously organized life was about to be turned upside down. The social worker followed closely, taking notes and observing every interaction. The girls, exhausted by the stress and emotions of the day, could barely keep their eyes open. On the way back to the neighborhood, Edward watched the twins in the rearview mirror. They had fallen asleep, their heads resting on each other. Their faces, even in sleep, bore an expression of worry that no child should have. The Miller mansion stood imposing in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. When the car passed through the wrought iron gates, Alice and Beatrice woke up, their eyes wide at the grandeur of the place. The immaculate garden, with its marble fountains and geometrically designed flower beds, looked like something out of a fairy tale. Regina, the house manager, waited at the main entrance with an expression that mingled curiosity and disapproval. At 60, she had managed the Miller household for 2 decades, and never, in all that time, had her employer brought strangers to live there, let alone children. "Regina, prepare the guest room on the 2nd floor," Edward ordered, his voice leaving no room for questions. "The girls will need a warm bath and a meal." The twins entered timidly, still carrying their worn backpacks with a few changes of clothes. The Italian marble floor reflected their frightened faces, and the crystal chandelier above seemed poised to crash down on their heads, so great was the apprehension in their eyes. "You don't need to be afraid," Edward tried to reassure them, but his voice sounded strange even to himself. He wasn't used to talking to children. "This will be your home for now." Regina led the girls upstairs, her heels echoing in the silent hallway. Edward followed, watching how they stayed close together, as if fearing separation at any moment. The guest room was larger than the entire house where they lived with their mother. 2 twin beds with Egyptian cotton sheets had been quickly made up, and the French silk curtains let in the golden late afternoon light. "I'll prepare their bath," Regina announced, still maintaining her formal posture. "And I'll ask the cook to prepare something light for dinner." As soon as the house manager left, the girls sat on the edge of one of the beds, looking tiny amidst the luxury of the room. Beatrice clutched a small, worn teddy bear, the only toy they had brought from home. "Is our mom going to be okay?" Alice asked, her voice trembling. "Will she be able to come live here too?" Edward felt a lump in his throat. How could he explain the gravity of the situation to 2 children? "Your mother is receiving the best possible care. As soon as she's better, you'll be able to see her." The adjoining bathroom, Regina prepared the bath with warm water. Edward could hear the sound of running water and the clinking of shampoo and soap bottles being arranged. "Sir," Regina called him discreetly into the hallway, "with all due respect, do you have any idea what you're doing? 2 children require special care, constant attention. And Ms. Garcia, well, she's always been a dedicated employee, but what, Regina?" Edward cut her off, feeling irritation rise. "Do you think we should have left the girls in foster care? Or perhaps at their house, alone, while their mother fights for her life?" Regina took a step back, surprised by the vehemence in her employer's voice. In 20 years, she had never seen him defend someone like this. Edward's phone vibrated. Again. It was Martha, reminding him of the important investor meeting scheduled for the next morning. He turned the phone off without responding. Back in the room, he found Alice tentatively exploring the large window overlooking the garden, while Beatrice remained seated, hugging the teddy bear. "There are birds here," Alice whispered, pointing to a hummingbird visiting the garden flowers. For a moment, her face lit up with a small smile. Dinner was served in the room, as Edward realized the girls wouldn't feel comfortable in the immense dining room. The cook, Carmen, had prepared vegetable soup and chicken and rice, along with a flan that made the girls' eyes sparkle. "Mommy used to make flan for parties," Beatrice commented softly, poking at the dessert with her spoon. "But only when there was enough money left over to buy condensed milk." Those simple words hit Edward like a punch to the gut. How many times had he complained about Maria's lateness, never considering her circumstances? How many times had he seen her as just another employee and not as a single mother struggling to provide for her daughters? Night fell over the mansion, bringing with it a heavy silence. The girls, after their bath and dinner, lay down in the soft beds. But Edward could see they wouldn't be able to sleep. Fear and worry about their mother were visible on their faces. Sitting in an armchair in the corner of the room, Edward watched the two, feeling completely unprepared for the responsibility he had taken on. How would he care for two children? How would he explain his decision to the company board? And more importantly, how would he ensure Maria Garcia survived to be reunited with her daughters? The first night in the mansion was the longest Edward had ever lived through. The girls' muffled sobs echoed through the silent corridor, and nothing Regina or Carmen tried seemed to calm them. Around 3 in the morning, exhausted in his own bed, Edward heard soft footsteps in the hall. He got up worriedly and found Alice, barefoot, wandering the dark corridors of the mansion. "I can't sleep," she whispered, her eyes red from crying. "I want my mommy." Edward felt completely out of his depth. In his 52 years, he had never needed to console a child. Not knowing exactly what to do, he led Alice to the kitchen. The room was less intimidating than the rest of the house, with its wooden cabinets and the lingering smell of Carmen's spices. "My mom makes hot chocolate when we can't sleep," Alice commented, sitting on one of the high stools at the kitchen island. Her bare feet dangled in the air, far from the floor. Edward rummaged through the cabinets until he found cocoa powder and milk. He had never made hot chocolate in his life. His coffee came from imported Italian machines, and his meals were always prepared by staff. As he tried to heat the milk without burning it, Alice watched him curiously. "You've never made hot chocolate before?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips for the first time since they arrived. "No," Edward admitted, stirring the liquid with a wooden spoon. "But there's always a first time." The hot chocolate was far from perfect, a bit watery and lumpy, but Alice drank it as if it were the most delicious thing in the world. "Thank you, Uncle Edward," she said, surprising him with the uncle that emerged naturally. The next morning, Edward awoke to the sound of raised voices coming from downstairs. He dressed quickly and went down to find Regina arguing with Martha, his personal assistant, in the entrance hall. "Mr. Miller can't miss this meeting," Martha insisted, her impeccable suit contrasting with her deep under-eye circles. "The investors flew in from overseas specifically for—" "And what do you suggest I do with the girls?" Edward interrupted, making both women jump at his presence. "Leave them alone?" "Sir, with all due respect," Martha began, consulting her tablet, "we have 3 crucial meetings today: the contract signing with the Chinese delegation and lunch with the mayor. You can't simply—" "Cancel everything," Edward ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Reschedule my agenda. Absolute priority for the next few weeks are only matters that cannot be delegated." Martha looked like she was about to faint. In 15 years as his assistant, she had never seen him cancel a meeting, let alone an entire day of commitments. Breakfast was served on the back porch, where the girls could see the garden. Beatrice hadn't touched her food, her eyes fixed on Edward's phone, waiting for news from the hospital. "We need to buy some things for you," Edward commented, trying to distract them. "Clothes, school supplies." "But we already have uniforms," Beatrice protested softly. "Mommy paid for them in installments." Those simple words revealed so much about the life they led. Edward made a mental note to check on the girls' school. Certainly, continuing at the same institution so far from the mansion wasn't appropriate. The phone rang, making everyone jump. It was the hospital. Edward answered immediately, stepping away so the girls wouldn't overhear the conversation. The surgery had been a success, but Maria remained in the ICU. Her condition was stable, but delicate. "When can we see her?" Alice asked as soon as Edward hung up, her eyes pleading. "Not yet," he replied, feeling the weight of that refusal. "Your mother needs a lot of rest to recover, but she's being very well taken care of, I promise." The rest of the morning was dedicated to practical matters. Edward had to deal with a pile of paperwork from social services, prove he had the means to temporarily care for the girls, sign liability forms. Each paper was a reminder of the extraordinary situation he found himself in. Regina, despite her initial resistance, began to show signs of concern for the twins. During lunch, Edward caught her patiently explaining to the girls how to use the different utensils without the judgmental tone she usually had. But it was mid-afternoon when the first major crisis erupted. Edward was in his office, participating in an unavoidable video conference, when he heard screams from the garden. He ran outside to find Alice fallen near the fountain, her knee bleeding, while Beatrice cried desperately. She wanted to see the fish, Beatrice sobbed, but she slipped on the edge of the fountain. Panic seized Edward. What if Alice had been seriously injured? How would he explain this to the social worker? To Maria when she woke up? His hands trembled as he carried the girl inside. "Calm down, it's nothing serious," Carmen intervened, appearing with a first aid kit. With the experience of someone who had tended many scrapes, she cleaned and bandaged Alice's knee, distracting her with stories from her own childhood. That seemingly simple incident left Edward unsettled for the rest of the day. Caring for 2 children was far more complex than managing a company with hundreds of employees. Every moment brought a new challenge, a new worry, a new fear of failing. On the morning of the 4th day, while the girls were still asleep, Regina found Edward in his office, holding a worn brown envelope. Her usually stern face was troubled. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, placing the envelope on the mahogany desk. "We found it when we were organizing the clothes we brought from Maria's house." Inside the envelope was a series of documents: old prescriptions, lab results, collection letters from a pharmacy, and most notably a diagnosis of severe anemia dated 6 months prior. "She knew," Edward murmured, scanning the papers. "She knew she was sick and still kept working." Regina pulled another paper from the envelope, a small notebook where Maria tracked her expenses. The pages revealed a history of sacrifices: installments for the girls' school uniforms, school supplies paid off over 10 months, medication always present on the list but often crossed out and replaced with basic necessities like rice and beans. "There's one more thing, sir." Regina hesitated before continuing. "I found this hidden among the clothes." She held out a crumpled pawnshop receipt. Maria had pawned her wedding ring and a pair of earrings, her only inheritance from her mother. Dubai medicine. Edward felt the weight of that discovery like a physical blow. How many times had he criticized Maria's lateness, her occasional absences, without ever imagining the drama she was living? a sick woman, hiding her condition so as not to lose her job, choosing between buying medicine for herself or food for her daughters. The sound of small footsteps in the hall alerted him. He quickly put the documents in the drawer as Alice and Beatrice entered the office, still in their pajamas. "Uncle Edward," Alice called, her voice hesitant. "Can we see Mommy today?" He looked at the girls' hopeful faces, feeling his heart clench. "I'll call the hospital right now and check. But first, we need to have breakfast and get ready, right?" During breakfast, Edward couldn't stop thinking about the documents. Between sips of coffee, he watched the twins eating the pancakes Carmen had made. How did Maria manage to keep her daughters so well cared for, with uniforms always clean and hair always neat, while barely having money for her own medicine? The phone rang. It was Denise, the social worker, with news that made Edward turn pale. "Mr. Miller, we need to talk urgently," she said, her professional tone barely masking her concern. "We've found out something about the girl's father." Edward moved away from the table, lowering his voice. "What did you find out?" "He's in town. He was seen in the neighborhood where Maria lived, asking about his daughters. He has a history of drinking problems and domestic violence. There are 3 police reports filed against him, all by Maria before he disappeared." Edward's blood ran cold. The girls, oblivious to the conversation, were playing with Buddy, Carmen's dog, who had ventured onto the porch. "He has no right to them," Edward stated, his voice trembling with contained anger. "Maria has sole custody, doesn't she?" The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "Actually, Mr. Miller, the paperwork isn't complete. The custody process was never finalized because Maria couldn't afford a lawyer." Edward closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of anger and guilt. How had he never noticed? How had he never questioned when Maria asked for salary advances, always with that embarrassed, "Look, we need to act fast," Denise continued. "If he tries to approach them, it could seriously complicate the girl's situation. And with Maria hospitalized, get all the necessary documentation ready." Edward interrupted her, his voice taking on the decisive tone he used in important negotiations. "I'll hire the best lawyers to handle this. That man isn't getting near the girls." After hanging up, Edward stood watching Alice and Beatrice through the office window. They had found an old ball in the garden and were trying to teach Buddy to fetch it, their laughter echoing for the first time since they arrived at the mansion. How would he tell them about their father? How would he protect these 2 children, who in just a few days had become so important in his life? And most importantly, how would he ensure Maria recovered so she could fight for her daughters? Regina entered the office silently, carrying another cup of coffee. "You're doing the right thing, sir," she said simply, surprising Edward with those words of support. "Those girls need protection, and Maria, well, she was always more than just an employee, wasn't she? She took care of this house like it was her own family." The week progressed, with a routine beginning to establish itself in the mansion. The girls were gradually adapting to the new environment, although the worry about their mother never left them. That morning, however, something was different. Edward noticed it as soon as he entered the kitchen and found Beatrice sitting alone at the table, barely touching her breakfast. "Where's your sister?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm as an alarm sounded in his mind. "She doesn't want to get out of bed," Beatrice replied, her voice almost a whisper. "Today is our dad's birthday." Edward felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Amidst all the turmoil of the past few days, he hadn't considered that the girls might miss their father, even after all the suffering he had caused. He climbed the stairs quickly, finding Alice curled up in bed, hugging the old teddy bear. Her eyes were red and swollen. "He promised he'd come back," she murmured when she noticed Edward's presence. "Every year he promises, but he never comes back." Edward sat on the edge of the bed, feeling completely inadequate to handle the situation. How could he explain the complexity of human relationships to a child? How could he justify abandonment? Sometimes, he began, choosing his words carefully, the people who are supposed to protect us end up hurting us. It's not your fault or your sister's. Alice sat up in bed, her eyes meeting Edward's. Mommy cried a lot when he left. She thought we didn't see, but we knew. One time he came back late at night shouting, breaking things. Edward felt his heart ache. Alice's words confirmed what the police reports had shown, but hearing it from a child was devastating. He's never going to hurt you again, he promised, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. Not you, not your sister, not your mother. Just then, Regina appeared at the door, her usually composed face showing concern. Mr. Miller, there's an urgent call for you in the office. It was his private investigator. We found the girl's father, he reported bluntly. He's staying in a cheap motel downtown, and he's been asking about them in the neighborhood. He found out they're at your house. Edward felt his blood run cold. Has he made any moves? Not yet, but... The investigator hesitated. He's been meeting regularly with a lawyer known for taking tough cases, the kind who doesn't mind using questionable tactics. After hanging up, Edward remained in his office, his mind racing. He needed to act quickly, but cautiously. Any misstep could harm the girls and Maria. The phone rang again. It was the hospital. Maria had woken up and was asking for her daughters. Edward felt a mix of relief and apprehension. How would he explain everything that was happening to her? When he returned to the bedroom, he found Carmen sitting on the bed with Alice, telling stories from her own childhood. The cook, who had initially resisted the girls' presence, now showed a maternal affection for them. "Did you know your mommy woke up?" Edward announced, seeing Alice's eyes instantly light up. "She's still weak, but we'll be able to visit her soon." Beatrice, who had joined her sister in the room, started crying with joy. Is she going to get better? Will she be able to come home? The innocent question struck Edward like an arrow. Which home? The small house in the neighborhood where there was barely food in the fridge, where the violent father could show up at any moment. "Your mother will need a lot of rest and care," he explained, sitting between them. "But we'll take good care of her, just like we're taking care of you." At that moment, they heard a commotion downstairs. A man's raised voice echoed through the entrance hall, followed by Regina's protests. "Where are my daughters?" the hoarse, drunken voice thundered. "I know they're here." The girls clung to each other, trembling. Alice began to cry silently. While Beatrice hid her face in her sister's shoulder, Edward stood up, his face a mask of determination. "Stay here with Carmen," he instructed, his voice gentler than it had ever been. "No one is taking you from here." He descended the stairs, feeling every muscle in his body tense. In the hall, he found a disheveled man, clothes wrinkled and eyes bloodshot. Robert Silver, the girl's father, had his fists clenched and glared hostilely at Regina. "Who are you to keep my daughters here?" he bellowed upon seeing Edward. "There, my blood, my family." Edward remained calm, though internally he felt a rising fury. "Family?" His voice came out controlled but sharp. "Family doesn't abandon. Family doesn't cause fear. And you, Mr. Silver, will not get near those girls." The air in the entrance hall was thick with tension. Robert Silver staggered a step forward, the reek of alcohol reaching Edward. "You have no right," he began, but Edward cut him off with a firm gesture. "Security," he called, his voice controlled. Two uniformed men appeared discreetly from the back of the house. "Please escort Mr. Silver out, and make sure our lawyers receive the security camera footage." Robert hesitated, his red eyes darting between the stairs and the security guards. "This isn't over," he threatened, backing towards the door. "You can't stop me from seeing my daughters." When the door finally closed, Edward let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Regina was trembling slightly, but maintained her dignified posture. The girls, she started. I know, Edward interrupted her, taking the stairs two at a time. He found Alice and Beatrice huddled in the corner of the room, clinging to each other, while Carmen tried to calm them. The sound of their father's voice, even after 3 years, still had the power to terrify them. He's gone, Edward assured them, kneeling beside them, and he won't be back. He always comes back, Beatrice whispered, her voice choked with tears. Even when Mommy said she wouldn't let him, he always found a way. Alice looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. One time he broke the bedroom window. Mommy had to work an extra month just to fix it. Each revelation was like a stab to Edward's chest. How dare that man present himself as a father? How dare he terrorize 2 innocent children? The phone rang again. It was Denise, the social worker. Mr. Miller, I heard about the incident, she said, concerned. We need to act quickly. Mr. Silva has already hired a lawyer and is threatening to file for joint custody. He doesn't have that right, Edward replied, controlling his voice so as not to frighten the girls further. He abandoned them. There are records of domestic violence. Unfortunately, without the finalized sole custody paperwork, he still retains some parental rights, Denise explained. But don't worry. I'll send over all the documentation we have on the domestic violence cases. And, she hesitated, there's one more thing. Maria is asking insistently for the girls. The doctors think a brief visit might aid her recovery. Edward looked at the twins, who remained embraced. They needed their mother as much as she needed them, but how could he ensure their safety with Robert lurking? I'll arrange the visit for today, he decided, with a private escort and all. Necessary precautions. The news that they would see their mother brought a new sparkle to the girls' eyes. Carmen helped them get ready, choosing the prettiest clothes they had bought in recent days. Will Mommy like my new dress? Alice asked, twirling in front of the mirror. She'll love it, dear, Carmen replied, braiding her hair carefully. But you know what she'll like even more? Seeing that beautiful smile on your face? On the way to the hospital, Edward couldn't stop thinking about how he would protect this fragile family. The armored car was followed by 2 other security vehicles. Perhaps overkill, but he wouldn't take any risks. At the hospital, Maria was pale but conscious, her eyes filled with tears when she saw her daughters entering the room. My girls, she whispered, extending her weak arms. Alice and Beatrice ran to hug her, careful with the tubes and machines. Edward stood at the door, watching the scene with a lump in his throat. Mr. Miller, Maria called, her voice faint. I'm sorry for all this trouble. You didn't have to. Don't say that, he interrupted gently. You haven't caused any trouble. Your daughters are wonderful, and being with them has taught me more than years of business meetings. Maria tried to smile, but her eyes revealed worry. He came back, didn't he? Robert, he always comes back when he senses we're starting to do okay. Edward approached the bed, his expression serious. Maria, I need you to trust me. I'll hire the best lawyers, handle the final custody issue. Robert won't hurt you anymore. Why are you doing all this for us? She asked, her eyes revealing a mix of gratitude and suspicion. Edward looked towards the girls, who were excitedly showing their mother the drawings they had made in the past few days. Because maybe I needed this family more than I realized, he answered sincerely. On the way back from the hospital, the car drove silently through the city streets. The girls, exhausted from the emotional encounter with their mother, had fallen, asleep in the back seat. Edward watched them in the rearview mirror, thinking about how their lives had intertwined so unexpectedly. Regina awaited them at the mansion door with a worried expression. Mr. Miller, the principal of the girls' school, called several times. They've already missed 2 weeks of classes, and there are questions about the documentation. Edward ran, a tired hand over his face, another problem to solve. How did Maria manage all this alone? School, uniforms, supplies, food, medicine. Each new detail revealed the daily struggle of this single mother. "I'll handle it tomorrow," he replied, carrying a sleeping Beatrice inside. The driver followed with Alice in his arms. The girls were so light, so fragile. The next morning, during breakfast, Alice asked a question that took everyone by surprise. "Uncle Edward, why don't you have a family?" Silence fell over the table. Regina, who was serving coffee, nearly dropped the cup. Edward felt his heart clench. He hesitated, realizing he'd never really thought about it. "I guess I've always been too busy with work." "But don't. You get sad," Beatrice insisted. "Mommy says family is the most important thing in the world." Edward looked down at his coffee, remembering the lonely Christmases, the birthdays celebrated with business meetings, the empty nights in his impeccable mansion. "Sometimes," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty, "it takes us a while to realize what's truly important." Carmen, who was in the kitchen, approached with a tray of freshly baked cookies. "It's never too late to build a family," she said with a gentle smile. "Sometimes it shows up when we least expect it." The moment was interrupted by the phone. It was Edward's lawyer with worrying news. "Robert Silver filed for joint custody," he informed. "He claims he's been sober for 3 months and has a steady job as a night security guard. He's also questioning Maria's ability to care for the girls, using her current health condition as leverage." Edward felt his stomach churn. He abandoned his daughters for 3 years. There are records of domestic violence. "Yes, but unfortunately the custody process was never finalized," the lawyer explained, "and he's still the biological father. We need to act fast. I suggest we schedule a meeting with Maria at the hospital later today. She needs to sign some documents." After hanging up, Edward found the girls in the garden, playing with Buddy. The dog, who previously lived alone in the backyard, now never left the twins' side. Alice threw a ball, which he fetched happily, while Beatrice petted him. "Girls," he called softly, "I need to go back to the hospital to talk to your mother. Do you want to come along?" Their faces lit up, but then Beatrice grew serious. "It's because of Daddy, right? We heard the phone." Edward knelt to their level. "Yes, it's about that too. But don't worry, we're taking care of everything." At the hospital, Maria was stronger, sitting up in bed. Her face was still pale, but her eyes held a different sparkle. The girls ran to hug her, while Edward and the lawyer waited outside. "She needs to know everything," the lawyer insisted, "about Robert's threats, about the custody filing." Edward nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. When they entered the room, the girls were showing their mother the drawings they had made at the mansion. "And Carmen makes the best hot chocolate in the world," Alice recounted excitedly. "But it's not like yours, Mommy." Maria smiled, but Edward could see the worry in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. "Girls," Carmen, who had accompanied the group, called from the door. "How about we go to the cafeteria and get some ice cream?" When they were alone, Edward and the lawyer explained the situation. Maria listened in silence, silent tears streaming down her face. "He's going to take my daughters," she whispered finally. "I always knew one day he'd try." "He won't," Edward stated firmly, holding her hand. "Maria, look at me. I won't let this happen. I have the best lawyers, resources, influence. We'll fight with everything we have." "Why?" she asked, echoing the previous day's question. "Why do you care so much?" Edward looked out the hospital window, seeing the girls returning with their ice cream, accompanied by Carmen. Their smiles, even after everything they had been through, lit up the hallway. "Because you taught me what family is," he replied simply. "And family protects each other." The news about the custody case began to affect the girls, even without them knowing all the details. That night, Edward was awakened by screams coming from the twins' room. He ran there to find Beatrice in the grip of a terrible nightmare. "Don't let him take us," she screamed, thrashing in bed while Alice tried to wake her. "Mummy, Uncle Edward!" Edward sat on the edge of the bed, gently touching Beatrice's shoulder. "It's okay, little one. It was just a dream. I'm here." The girl woke with a start, tears streaming down her face. Without a word, she threw herself into Edward's arms, sobbing. Alice joined the hug, also crying. "He was in the dream," Beatrice whispered between sobs, "just like that night when he broke the door." Regina appeared at the door, wearing her silk robe. Her usually stern face was marked with concern. "I'll make some calming tea," she offered, her voice softer than usual. While they waited for the tea, Edward sat between the girls, each leaning on one of his shoulders. He began to hum an old lullaby his own mother used to sing so many years ago. He didn't remember the lyrics completely, but the melody had a calming effect. "Did your mummy sing to you?" Alice asked, her voice still trembling. Edward hesitated. "Yes, when I was very little. Before she passed away." "Did she leave like our daddy?" Beatrice asked innocently. "No," Edward replied, feeling a lump in his throat. "She got sick, like your mom is now. But back then, I didn't have anyone to help me, to protect me." The girls absorbed this information in silence. Regina returned with the tea and cinnamon cookies, sitting in a nearby armchair. "Maybe that's why God put you in my path," Edward continued, surprised by his own words. "So I could do for you what no one did for me." The next morning, during breakfast, the phone rang. It was Denise, the social worker, with disturbing news. "Robert Silver has started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings," she informed. "He's building a strong case to prove he's changed. He even got recommendation letters from his new job." Edward felt his stomach clench. "He's only doing this to get custody as soon as he has the girls." "I know," Denise interrupted, "but the judge has to consider all the evidence, and an attempt at rehabilitation counts in his favor." After hanging up, Edward remained in his office, watching the girls play in the garden with Buddy through the window. How could he protect them from someone using the system to his advantage? The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts. It was Carmen, carrying a tray with coffee. "You haven't eaten anything today, sir," she commented, placing the tray on the desk. "You need to take care of yourself to be able to care for them." Edward smiled faintly. "How do you do it, Carmen? You always know what everyone needs." The Tsar. Cook sat in the chair opposite the desk, something she would never have done weeks ago. "When my children were small, I went through hard times too. But I learned that children are stronger than we think. They just need love and security. And what if I can't protect them?" Edward let his biggest fear slip out. "What if he wins custody?" "You're not alone in this fight, sir," Carmen replied firmly. "Everyone in this house is on your side. Even Regina, who was so resistant at first, now can't imagine the mansion without the girls." As if to confirm her words, they heard the twins' laughter echoing from the garden. They had discovered the old treehouse Edward had as a child, and Regina, surprisingly, was helping them clean and decorate it. "See," Carmen smiled. "They didn't just bring joy to you, sir. They brought new life to this whole house." Edward stood up, a new determination in his eyes. "I need to go to the hospital. Maria has to know everything that's happening, and we need to be ready for the hearing next week." "Are you taking the girls?" "Not today," he replied, watching them play carefree. "Let them have one more day of peace. They'll face enough tension soon enough." Before leaving, Edward stopped in the garden. Alice and Beatrice ran up to him, their faces flushed from playing. "I'm going to see your mom," he said, crouching down to hug them. "I promise to bring back news." "Tell her we're taking good care of Buddy," Alice requested, "and that we're being strong," Beatrice added, her eyes revealing a maturity beyond her years. Edward felt his heart clench. These little ones had suffered so much, yet they kept hope alive. He wouldn't let anything hurt them again. At the hospital, Maria was sitting up in bed, stronger than in previous days. Her face was still pale, but her eyes showed a renewed determination. Spread across her lap were a series of old papers, receipts, documents, letters yellowed with time. "I found these at my house," she said as soon as Edward entered the room. "I asked my neighbor to get them. They're proof of what Robert did all those years." Edward pulled up a chair sitting beside the bed. Maria began sorting the papers with trembling hands. "Here," she showed a worn court document. "The first restraining order I got 4 years ago. He had just lost his job and started drinking more than usual. One night," her voice faltered, "he came home furious, broke everything in sight. The girls were only 5. They hid under the bed." Edward felt his heart ache imagining the little girls trembling in fear, hearing their father's rage on the other side of the door. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked softly. "About your health, about all this?" Maria wiped away a stubborn tear. "You had already given me so many chances. When other bosses fired me because of absences to go to the police station or the doctor, you were always understanding. I was afraid of losing my job if I told you everything." Edward picked up another paper, a handwritten letter dated 2 years ago. It was from Robert, promising he had changed, that he deserved another chance. "He always came back," Maria continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Said he had changed, was going to church, had found a job. I wanted to believe him, you know. I wanted the girls to have a father. But after a few weeks, everything went back to normal. The drinking, the fights, the money disappearing." A noise at the door interrupted the conversation. It was the social worker, Denise, carrying a thick folder. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, approaching, "but we need to review some points before the hearing." For the next hour, they discussed legal strategies. Maria's frail health was a concern. Robert could use it against her in court. On the other hand, the documents she had kept were concrete proof of years of abuse and neglect. "There's one more thing," Maria said hesitantly, pulling a folded envelope from under her pillow. "I found this among the girls' old things." It was a drawing by Alice, dated 3 years ago. It showed a house with stick figures, the family, but the figure representing the father was drawn in black with red scribbles around it. On the back, the teacher had written a concerned note about the girls' withdrawn behavior. "Children often tell the truth in their drawings," Denise commented, examining the paper. "This could be important to show the emotional impact." Edward looked at the drawing, feeling a mix of sadness and anger. How could someone hurt their own family so much? "Maria," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I want to make a proposal. After you're discharged, you don't have to go back to that house. There's more than enough room at the mansion, not just for the girls, but for you too." Maria's eyes widened in surprise. "But Sid, what will people think? People in the neighborhood are already talking, saying that you—" "I don't care about gossip," Edward interrupted her gently. "I care about your safety. Besides," he smiled slightly, "I don't think Carmen would ever forgive me if I let you leave. She already considers the girls her granddaughters." Just then, a nurse hurried into the room. "Ms. Garcia, your blood pressure is very high. You need to rest." While the nurse adjusted the IV and medication, Edward carefully gathered all the documents into the folder he had brought. This evidence would be crucial at the hearing. "Rest," he told Maria, who was already starting to feel the effects of the medicine. "I'll take care of everything." In the hallway, Denise caught up with him. "Mr. Miller, I need to warn you. Robert managed to get a few more recommendation letters. He's building an image of a repentant, hard-working father who wants a second chance." Edward stopped, turning to face her. "He can try to build whatever image he wants. But I won't let him hurt this family again, not even if I have to use every cent of my fortune, every contact I have." Leaving the hospital, the sun was setting on the horizon. Edward looked at the orange sky, thinking of the girls waiting for him at home. In just a few weeks, they had transformed his life in ways he Could never have imagined. And now, he was about to fight the most important battle of his life, not for money or power, but for love. The eve of the hearing arrived with a palpable tension in the mansion. Maria had been discharged from the hospital, still weak, but determined to be in court. Edward insisted she stay in the first-floor guest room where she could rest properly. The girls were happy to have their mother nearby, but they sensed the heavy atmosphere hanging over the house. That morning, during breakfast, Alice barely touched her favorite pancakes. "What if the judge doesn't believe us?" she asked softly, playing with her fork. "My old teacher never believed us when we told her about Daddy." Maria, sitting beside her daughters, held her small hand. "This time is different, my love. We have people on our side." Edward watched the scene, feeling his heart ache. The night before, he had spent hours in his office with the lawyers, reviewing every detail of the case. The evidence was strong, but Robert had built a convincing narrative of redemption. Regina entered the dining room with a worried expression. "Mr. Miller, there's a reporter at the gate. It seems someone leaked information about the hearing." Edward felt his blood run cold. It was exactly what he feared. The press sniffing out a sensational story about the wealthy businessman and the housekeeper. "Don't let anyone in," he ordered, standing up, "and call security to tighten surveillance." Maria turned even paler. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. Maybe if I hadn't agreed to stay here." "Don't even finish that sentence," he interrupted gently. "You're family now, and family weathers the storms together." Carmen, who was in the kitchen, approached with a tray of calming tea. "Girls, how about helping me make that chocolate cake you love so much? It'll help pass the time." The twins looked at their mother, who nodded with an encouraging smile. As they headed to the kitchen, Edward received another call. It was his private investigator. "Mr. Miller, we found something out about Robert." The voice sounded urgent on the other end. "The job he got, it's a front. The owner of the place is his lawyer's cousin, and the recommendation letters were all written in the same week." Edward felt a glimmer of hope. "Can you prove it?" "Yes, sir. I'm preparing all the documentation now." When he hung up, he found Maria standing in the office doorway, leaning on a cane. Her face showed exhaustion, but her eyes held a determined glint. "Mr. Miller," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something I've never told anyone." He offered her a chair, noticing how weak she still was. Maria sat down, nervously clutching the fabric of her simple dress. The last time Robert showed up before he disappeared for 3 years. She took a deep breath. He wasn't alone. There was a man with him, someone he owed money to. They threatened to take the girls if I didn't pay the debt. Edward felt his blood boil. "Why didn't you report it?" "I was scared," she whispered. "The man seemed dangerous, had connections. That's when I started working overtime, taking any job I could find. I wanted to save the money before they came back. And that's why your health deteriorated," Edward completed, finally understanding. "You worked yourself to the bone to protect your daughters." From downstairs came the sound of the girls' laughter in the kitchen, mixed with the smell of baking. "Cake!" Maria looked out the window, silent tears streaming down her face. "They're all I have," she said simply. "I'd do anything to protect them." Edward stood up, a new determination on his face. "And now you're not alone in this fight." Just then, Regina rushed into the office. "Sir, more reporters have arrived." And she hesitated. "Robert is among them, giving an interview." Edward and Maria hurried to the window. Down below, surrounded by microphones and cameras, Robert Silver played the part of the repentant father perfectly. "I just want a chance to prove I've changed," his choked voice reached them, "to be the father my daughters deserve." Maria trembled, her legs giving way. Edward caught her before she fell. "He won't win," he promised, his voice firm. "Not this time. Tomorrow, at the hearing, the whole truth will come out." From downstairs, Alice and Beatrice's voices called for their mother, proud of the cake they had helped make. That innocent sound, full of hope, was all Edward and Maria needed to strengthen their resolve. The battle would be difficult, but they would fight with all their might to protect the happiness of those children. The morning of the hearing dawned grey and cold, as if the sky itself shared the apprehension hanging over the mansion. Edward found Maria in the living room before sunrise, sitting alone in the dark, her hands trembling as she held an untouched cup of tea. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered when he approached. "I spent the whole night watching the girls sleep, thinking it might be the last time." "It won't be," Edward interrupted firmly, sitting beside her. "Trust me." Carmen appeared silently, carrying a tray with a light breakfast. Her wrinkled hands gently squeezed Maria's shoulder before she withdrew. The twins woke shortly after, already dressed in the simple but elegant dresses Regina had carefully chosen. Alice clutched her teddy bear tightly, while Beatrice wouldn't let go of her sister's hand. "You'll stay here with Carmen and Regina," Edward explained gently. "I promise we'll bring back good news." "But we want to go with you," Beatrice protested, her eyes filling with tears. "What if Daddy tries to take us?" Maria stifled a sob, hugging her daughters tightly. Edward felt his heart ache seeing the fear in the girl's eyes. "Nobody is going to take you," he assured them, kneeling to their level. "Remember what we talked about. Sometimes we have to be strong, even when we're scared." On the way to the courthouse, the car was silent. The weak sunlight, managing to pierce the clouds, reflected on Maria's pale face, highlighting the deep circles under her eyes from her sleepless night. The lawyer met them at the building entrance. "We have news," he said in a low voice. "The investigator got more proof about the fake job Robert has, and there's something else. We found the man he owed money to." Maria gripped Edward's arm tightly. Did he agree to testify?" "Better than that," the lawyer smiled discreetly. "He brought proof of the threats, messages, audio recordings." Before they could continue, a commotion caught their attention. Robert arrived, accompanied by his lawyer and a small group of people, including a pastor from a local church and his supposed new boss. "Maria," he called, his voice strangely controlled. "Can we talk for a minute? Just the two of us." Edward stepped forward, placing himself between them. "Any conversation will be in the presence of the lawyers." Robert's eyes, previously gentle for the cameras following them, darkened for a moment. "What right do you have to meddle in my family? Just because you have money, you think you can buy everyone?" "Your family," Edward replied, keeping his voice low but firm. "Where were you when your daughters cried from hunger, when Maria worked sick just to buy medicine?" Robert's lawyer pulled him away before the situation escalated. Inside the courtroom, the air felt even heavier. Maria sat rigidly, her hands clutching the folder with the documents that would prove years of abuse and abandonment. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, began by reviewing the social worker's reports. Robert was the first to present his case, perfectly playing the role of the repentant father. "I made mistakes," he admitted, his voice choked with emotion. "But I found God, I found purpose. My daughters deserve to have a father present." His lawyer presented the recommendation letters, the AA meeting attendance certificates, photos of him helping with volunteer work at the church. Then it was Maria's turn. With trembling steps, she approached the front of the room. Her voice, initially weak, gained strength as she recounted years of abuse, nights of terror, hurried escapes with the girls in the middle of the night. Your Honor, she concluded, silent tears streaming down her face. My daughters haven't slept properly in years. Every noise at night, every door slam, they think it's him coming back to hurt them again. Edward's lawyer then presented the new evidence, the fake job, the forged letters, and finally the recordings. Robert's drunken voice echoed through the room, threatening to take the girls if his debts weren't paid. The color drained from Robert's face. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he stood up abruptly. "This is a setup," he shouted, his true temper finally showing. "That rich guy is buying everyone. He wants to steal my family." "Mr. Silver," the judge's voice cut through the air like a razor, "one more outburst like that, and you will be removed from the courtroom." Edward watched the scene, his heart pounding. Back at the mansion, he knew the girls waited anxiously, probably clinging to each other, praying their family wouldn't be destroyed again. The silence following Robert's outburst was thick, almost palpable. The judge carefully leafed through the presented documents, her face a mask of concentration. Maria barely breathed, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. Just then, the courtroom door opened. A middle-aged woman in a nurse's uniform entered timidly. Edward recognized her immediately. It was Sandra, the nurse who had cared for Maria during her hospitalization. "Your Honor," Edward's lawyer spoke up, "we'd like to call one last witness. Ms. Sandra Martinez has worked at the hospital for 20 years and has something important to share." Robert shifted restlessly in his chair while his lawyer whispered something in his ear. The judge gestured for Sandra to approach. "It was 3 years ago," Sandra began, her voice trembling but firm. "I was on my night shift when Ms. Garcia arrived at the ER. She was badly injured." The girls, so small, clinging to her hand, trembling with fear. Maria lowered her head, tears silently streaming down her face as Sandra continued. "She didn't want to file a report. She was scared. But I documented everything in the medical chart, took photos of the injuries as protocol dictates." That night, Sandra took a deep breath. Mr. Robert Silver showed up at the hospital, agitated, shouting that he wanted to see his daughters. "We had to call security." "That's a lie!" Robert jumped up again, his face red with anger. "She's being paid to say these things." "Mr. Silver," the judge's voice was sharp, "this is your final warning." Sandra removed an envelope from her purse. "I kept copies of all the records, Your Honor, including the other times Ms. Garcia needed treatment, always with the same marks, always with the terrified girls." Edward watched Robert out of the corner of his eye. The man seemed smaller now, his repentant father facade crumbling with each new revelation. "There's one more thing," Sandra continued. "During Ms. Garcia's last hospital stay, when she was very weak from not getting proper treatment, Mr. Robert Silver showed up again. Not to see how she was, but to demand money. I have the security camera footage." Robert's lawyer stood up immediately. "Your Honor, I object to this evidence. We were not notified." "Actually," Edward's lawyer intervened smoothly, "all evidence was duly filed and shared within the legal time frame." The judge watched the recording on her computer, her face hardening with every moment. On the screen, Robert staggered through the hospital corridors, shouting at staff, demanding to see Maria to get what was rightfully his. "Mr. Silver," the judge finally spoke, "can you explain this scene? It happened just 2 weeks ago during your supposed rehabilitation period." Robert opened and closed his mouth several times, unable to form a coherent response. His lawyer seemed to have given up trying to control him. "That damn businessman is destroying my family," he finally exploded. "First he steals my wife, then he turns my daughters against me." "Your daughters?" Maria found the strength to speak, her voice trembling with indignation. "You don't even know that Beatrice is allergic to strawberries, that Alice is afraid of thunder. You don't know they cry secretly on their birthday because you promised to be there and never showed up." The room plunged into heavy silence. The judge removed her glasses, massaging the bridge of her nose as she gathered her thoughts. "I believe I've seen enough," she declared finally. "This court cannot ignore the evidence presented. Mr. Silva, your actions demonstrate a consistent pattern of abuse and neglect. Your recent rehabilitation attempts, which now appear clearly fraudulent, do not erase years of trauma inflicted upon these children." Edward felt Maria tremble beside him. Instinctively, he held her hand, offering silent support. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the evidence of coercion and attempted extortion is extremely serious. I am issuing an immediate restraining order prohibiting any contact from Mr. Silva with Ms. Garcia or the children." Robert shot up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "You can't do this. They're my daughters." "Bailiffs!" the judge called, her authoritative voice overriding Robert's shouts. "Remove Mr. Silva from the courtroom. And," she added, looking at his lawyer, "I suggest you advise your client on the legal consequences of violating a court order." As Robert was forcibly removed, still yelling threats, Maria broke down in silent tears. They weren't tears of sadness, Edward realized, but of relief. Years of fear and anguish were finally coming to an end. The drive back to the mansion was quiet, but unlike the morning's tension, there was now a sense of peace in the air. Maria looked out the car window, watching the city go by, as if seeing everything with new eyes. Occasionally, a tear escaped down her cheek, but it was accompanied by a small smile. Edward watched her discreetly, wondering how one person could carry so much weight for so long without crumbling. "You were very brave today," he said softly. Maria wiped away a tear. "I only managed because I wasn't alone. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly had someone on my side." When the car passed through the mansion gates, they saw Alice and Beatrice running across the lawn towards them, followed by Carmen and Regina. The girls had spent the morning making cookies to distract themselves from the anxiety. "Mommy!" they cried in unison, practically throwing themselves into Maria's arms as soon as she got out of the car. "It's okay now, my little ones," she whispered, hugging them tightly. "Everything's okay." Edward was watching the scene when he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Regina, her usually stern eyes glistening with tears. "You did the right thing, sir," she said simply. Carmen approached with a tray of still warm cookies. "The girls wouldn't let anyone try them until you arrived," she commented with a smile. "They said it was for celebrating." Sitting on the back porch, with the afternoon sun finally breaking through the clouds, there was an air of quiet celebration. Alice and Beatrice distributed the cookies they had made, proud of their slightly crooked but lovingly made creations. "Uncle Edward," Beatrice called shyly, "can we live in the treehouse forever now?" Edward felt his heart clench. "The treehouse is yours," he replied, "just like everything else." Maria started to protest, but he interrupted her gently. "Maria, what I said at the hospital is true. There's plenty of room here, and more importantly, there's plenty of love too." "But I can't accept," she began. "Yes, you can," Carmen intervened, surprising everyone. "My dear, sometimes life offers us a second chance, not out of charity, but because we deserve it." Regina, who had maintained her usual discretion until then, cleared her throat lightly. "Actually," she said, "I've already prepared the room next to the girls, and, well, perhaps we could turn that empty office on the first floor into a study room for them." Edward looked surprised at his house manager. In 20 years, he had never seen her so involved in changes to the house. "And I was thinking," Carmen continued, "that we could start a vegetable garden out back. The girls love playing in the dirt, and it would be nice to have fresh herbs in the kitchen." Maria listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. Alice climbed onto her lap, wiping her tears with her small hands. "Don't cry, Mommy," she pleaded. "Uncle Edward said we're a family now." "And family takes care of each other," Beatrice completed, repeating the words she had heard Edward say so many times in recent weeks. Edward watched the scene, feeling a strange warmth in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. His mansion, once so cold and silent, now overflowed with life. The sound of the girls' laughter, the smell of Carmen's cookies, even Regina's affectionate scolding had become essential parts of his days. "Maria," he said softly, "I'm not just offering a place to live. I'm offering a home for all of you." Buddy, who was lying at Beatrice's feet, lifted his head and barked, as if agreeing. "See," Edward smiled, "even Buddy has decided." The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues. In the treehouse, now decorated with colorful curtains chosen by Regina, a small makeshift flag made by the girls fluttered in the afternoon breeze. On it, in childish letters, was written, "Our family." Maria looked at her daughters, at the people who had become much more than employers and colleagues, at this mansion that somehow inexplicably had become her refuge. "Home," she repeated softly, as if testing the sound of the word, and for the first time in many years she felt she truly knew what it meant. 6 months had passed since that decisive afternoon in court. The Miller mansion, once known for its sobriety and silence, now pulsed with different energy. Autumn painted the garden in golden tones, and the twins' laughter echoed through the once empty corridors. On that Saturday morning, Edward woke to the familiar aroma of chocolate cake wafting through the house. In the kitchen, he found Maria helping Carmen with breakfast, her face rosy and healthy, so different from the pallor of her hospital days. Proper treatment and the absence of constant fear had worked wonders for her recovery. "Good morning," she smiled, pouring Edward a cup of coffee. It was no longer the timid smile of the former employee, but the warm smile of someone who finally felt at home. "Are the girls still asleep?" he asked, savoring the coffee. "Actually," Carmen replied with a knowing smile, "they're in the garden with Regina. They're preparing a surprise." Edward raised his eyebrows, curious. Regina, who once saw the children as a disruption to the household order, was now a constant accomplice in their little adventures. When he went out into the garden, Edward understood the reason for the secret. A colorful banner hung from the treehouse bearing the words "Happy Family Day," painted in childish letters. Alice and Beatrice, wearing dresses they had picked out themselves at the store, beamed proudly beside their creation. "Surprise!" they shouted in unison when they saw him. "But it's not an official holiday," Edward commented, genuinely moved. "We know," Alice explained, her eyes sparkling, "but our new teacher said family is every day, so we decided to create our own special day." "And we chose today," Beatrice added, "because it's been 6 months since Mommy got better and we got a new family." Maria approached, carrying a tray of hot chocolate, much better now than Edward's first clumsy attempt on that sleepless night. "The girls spent all week planning," she recounted, her voice thick with emotion. "They made sure to include everyone. They even put out a special bowl for Buddy." The dog, hearing his name, barked happily, wagging his tail beside the twins. He was no longer the lonely dog from the backyard, but a beloved member of this peculiar family. Regina appeared carrying another surprise, a photo album she had secretly put together over the past few months. Within its pages, their story unfolded. The girls' first day at the mansion, still frightened and uncertain, Maria leaving the hospital weak but hopeful, the first laughs in the kitchen with Carmen, Edward awkwardly learning to braid the twins' hair. "Look at this one," Carmen pointed to a particular photo. It showed Edward asleep in the armchair in the girls' room, with Alice and Beatrice also asleep, one on each side, after a night of nightmares that were now becoming increasingly rare. Edward flipped through the album, feeling his heart overflow with emotion. How had his life changed so much in such a short time? He, who had always measured success in numbers and contracts, now measured it in smiles and small daily victories. "There's room for more photos," Regina commented softly. "Many more." Maria, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "You know, the other day Alice asked me why I sometimes cry when I look at you all. I told her there are tears of joy, of gratitude, tears that heal, and there are families we choose," Edward completed, hugging the girls who ran into his lap. "Families we build with love, not obligation." At that moment, watching the group gathered in the garden, Regina discreetly wiping away a tear, Carmen serving more hot chocolate, Buddy running in excited circles, Edward understood a profound truth. Sometimes, life's greatest blessings come disguised as challenges. That afternoon, he went to Maria's house determined to fire her. Wasn't the end of one story, but the beginning of a much more beautiful one. "Uncle Edward," Alice called, tugging at his sleeve, "can we hang our family picture in the living room? Now? The one we took at the picnic?" "Of course, little one," he replied, his voice choked up. "In fact, I think that picture deserves the most special place in the house." "In your office," Beatrice suggested shyly. "That way, when you're working, you'll remember you have to come back to us soon." Edward laughed, a laugh full of joy and gratitude. "Exactly, because now I know success isn't measured by what we achieve, but by who we have beside us to share the achievements with." The sun climbed, higher in the sky, promising a perfect day. In the house that was once just a luxurious building and was now truly a home, an unlikely family celebrated not just a special day, but the certainty that love, when true, has the power to heal wounds, break down walls, and build bridges between worlds that seemed so far apart. And in the treehouse, the small flag bearing the words, "Our Family," continued to flutter in the gentle breeze, no longer as a hope, but as a joyful affirmation that sometimes life's greatest treasures are those we cannot buy, only win with the heart.